Hello class, Mr. Young here. Welcome to Chapter 15. Chapter 15 is a bit on the shorter end. It's called The Spirit of Reform, and as you may have guessed, we're talking all about different social changes. And we really cover a little bit into the past, things we've studied before in terms of time period. This chapter's taking a step back and said, all right, we've talked about who was president and wars. Let's talk about what was going on in terms of how society was changing while all these things were happening. So we have 3 lessons. We've got lesson 1, social reform. So we're going to talk about things like prison reform, how they treated people that were mentally unwell, and stuff like that. Religious revival is involved. There's a great revival at the time, people getting back to their sort of Christian roots. And we also mentioned the temperance movement, which was the early movements to ban alcohol, which some states actually did for a little bit. Lesson 2, the abolitionists. All right, we're getting really into some pre-Civil War stuff when we talk about the abolitionists. And basically the start of people wanting to free the African American slaves. We do talk about some awesome abolitionists, some awesome characters like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, folks like that. We also end up talking about in lesson 3 the women's movement. So there are a ton of parallels between the abolition movement and the women's movement, because a lot of the abolitionists were women, and they sort of piggybacked off of each other. Like, we're talking, they would meet each other at different conventions and be like, you know what's wrong? Slavery. You know what else is wrong? Women can't vote. This is baloney. And so they end up forming multiple organizations that are different abolition groups and women's rights groups. That lesson 3 is pretty long. Actually, lesson 2 is pretty long too. Lesson 1 is a short one, and then 2 and 3 are pretty long. There's a lot to talk about when you talk about the abolitionist movement and the women's rights movement. Some good stories in here. As I mentioned, it is a shorter chapter. We take a look real quick. Here's how it's going to pan out. It's only like a week long. There we go. Loading up. Alright, yep. So we're going to start with intro day. 1, 2, 3. Study test. There'll be a teen biz or current events, something in there on the Thursday. But other than that, yeah, we'll get in and out of the spirit of reform pretty quick, and be moving right into the chapter that precedes this Civil War. So coming along, kids, go ahead, bump on to the very next page. Take a look at that vocab. The video is there of me with all the words, of course, and then move on to the assignment. All right. I'll see you on the next page.